Welcome back, time travelers! I hope you enjoyed your journey through the age of realism, that period when art tried to truly imitate life. No dressing it up and idealizing it, no lofty perspectives or individual opinions, just raw, unaltered realism. Now I've got to tell you, I've got a new appreciation for realism after receiving a gift from my cousin. It's a painting she bought for me. She said she saw it and just couldn't pass it up because it reminded her so much of our family, and one of the figures in it looked just like me. Now, I've always wondered if I had a doppelganger out there somewhere, someone who looks just like me. And then this painting arrives today, and I'm not sure how to take it. Do you see a resemblance? I mean, I know you don't know the whole family, but can you figure out which one is supposed to be me? I'm just not sure I get it. But enough about me, because time travelers, you are about to embark on a bold new journey. We have finally reached the 20th century and it is full speed ahead. No turning back. Everywhere you look, things are changing. The shift to an industrial age has occurred, and the whole world seems interconnected. And for artists and authors, that means that modernism has arrived. Realism is yesterday's news. In this unit, we're going to learn all about modernism, the movement that spanned the first half of the 20th century. And in this video, I'll introduce you to the age of modernism, modernism in art and literature, 4 modernist poets, and your lesson agenda. By the time this video comes to an end, you'll be ready to cruise full speed ahead into the age of modernism. Modernism burst onto the scene in the early 20th century, and it was revolutionary. Modernists challenged traditional norms and traditional structures, and they opened up new avenues for creative expression. In part, this was based on a certain psychologist named Sigmund Freud. Freud developed the theory of the unconscious mind. According to Freud, thoughts and feelings that people are not consciously aware of influence their behavior. In his theory, the unconscious mind is identified as the place where repressed feelings, hidden memories, habits, thoughts, desires, and reactions dwell. As you can imagine, for artists and authors, this suddenly meant that there was something in addition to external forces that was shaping human behavior. What we see and perceive to be real is just a perception. Another mind might perceive it differently because there's so much going on beneath the surface. It's like the mind is an iceberg. A small portion is accessible, but beneath the surface, there's so much going on that we just don't see. At the same time these new ideas in psychology were becoming popular, there were a lot of changes going on all around the world. The First World War began in 1914, and over the course of 4 years, more than 9 million soldiers and about 12 million civilians died, and about another 21 million were left with life-altering injuries. How do you move on from that? Especially when the balance of the world has changed. Empires were destroyed, new governments and systems arose, boundaries changed, and the United States became a world power. Can you imagine how life must have seemed so fragile? And people must have felt like it was hard to trust anything to be real and lasting. And America was changing too. Congress passed an amendment prohibiting the sale or transport of alcohol. Women were granted the right to vote, and Native Americans were granted citizenship. And do you think that these changes happened smoothly? Of course not. Then along came a stock market crash, a Great Depression, big-time crime sprees, and another world war. So what kind of impact do you think all of this chaos and change had on art and literature? Well, the chaotic nature of the modern world led artists to try some experimental techniques. They created an altered sense of reality, one based more on perception than on objective observation. And this experimentation is seen in the visual arts before it emerged in literary works. Take a look at these Impressionists paintings by French artists Claude Monet. They don't have a crisp look of reality. They're kind of fuzzy and blurry. And there's a noticeable emphasis on the way light affects each scene. And Impressionism is just one way artists begin to experiment. Modern art is filled with avant-garde, or radically experimental movements, beginning in the late 19th century and continuing throughout the first half of the 20th century. Let's take a look at one particular art movement called Cubism. Notice how artist Pablo Picasso's work here is very flat and two-dimensional, and how it seems rather distorted, not realistic. In Cubism, the subject of the artwork is fragmented into a sequence of planes, lines, and arcs. Well, this fragmentation, this distortion, is representative of how people must have felt during a chaotic time of shifting powers, life-altering changes, and the feeling that they just couldn't trust anything to last. And then there was this iceberg of unconscious thought lurking beneath the surface. You get the idea. For writers, the movement resulted in a lot of experimental techniques as well. They played around with timelines and point of view. They developed stream of consciousness writing, a style of writing that tries to capture the wild ride of thoughts and feelings that flow through the human mind. They used fragmentation. Their images and illusions often seemed disordered, and sometimes they merged contrasting images and illusions, a technique called juxtaposition. Modernists explored subjectivity, the idea that each person experiences the world differently, based on their individual opinions, inner emotions, psychological state, and perception. And their themes revolved around disillusionment, which is a word that expresses the kind of disappointment you feel when something is not as good as you had once believed. Their characters were caught up in cycles of cynicism, pessimism, loneliness, and despair. So, you may be asking, who are these modernist writers? Well, in this unit, we'll look at some novelists like F. Scott Fitzgerald, William Faulkner, and Ernest Hemingway. But we'll begin our journey into modernism this week with four very different but very important American poets. There's Thomas Stearns Eliot, better known as T.S. Eliot, although he became a British citizen in 1927. T.S. Eliot was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, and he graduated from Harvard University in 1906. Like a lot of modernists, Eliot moved to Europe and connected with an artistic community there. In 1915, he published The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, a poem that follows the stream of consciousness ramblings of an indecisive speaker who is searching for purpose in a modern world that's filled with triviality, artificiality, hypocrisy, and emptiness. The format of the poem is disjointed and fragmented, a bit chaotic, and it sets the tone for much of Eliot's work. Then there's Ezra Pound, who grew up in a mining community in Haley, Idaho, but after college became an expatriate, an American who moved abroad. Pound was a poet, critic, translator, and major figure in the modernist movement. He is credited with starting the Imagist movement within modernism. The idea was to use concrete images and very few words to create layers of meaning that could be discussed and interpreted on many levels. There's William Carlos Williams, a New Jersey physician and poet. Williams was another imagist who economized his words down to the bare minimum. Although his poems are brief, his imagery within them is sharp, concrete, and open to interpretation. And finally, we have Edna St. Vincent Millay. She was raised by a single mom in Camden, Maine, and her poetry was recognized while she was still quite young. Millay challenged conventions in her life as well as in the themes of her writing. But unlike many other modernists, she often used traditional meter and rhyme in her poetry. You'll read works from these four poets this week, and you'll analyze them for characteristics of modernism. Think about fragmentation, the way lines of poetry are broken apart and images and illusions are juxtaposed. Look for stream of consciousness writing and psychological exploration. Notice the way themes reflect the disillusionment of the age and be aware of experimental structures and techniques. Nothing experimental here. On days 1 through 4, you'll have PDF readings and activities followed by online practice. On day 5, you'll have reflection questions. You'll refresh your writing skills, and you'll write an original poem in the style of Modernism. And then we'll close out the lesson with an online assessment. Okay, well, you have work to do, and I need to figure out where to hang this family portrait. You know, now that we talked about all this subjectivity and fragmentation and experimentation, I think I'm starting to see the resemblance.